I will start with, this is basically my short little spotlight to give people a peek into you and your world. Livi Redden, who is doing some amazing work. We're going to find out what. I'm just going to share a little bit about you. You're a social entrepreneur, an author, a podcaster, and I'm seeing you're a super connector. And you wrote a book, The Sooner You Know, The Better. And you talk about how teens and 20-somethings can have a healthier relationship with themselves, their minds, and other people, alongside offering up practical tips to navigate life with less stress and more clarity. Yes. Where were you when I was in my 20s? Libby, where were you? What inspired you to come to this work? Tell me.
Yeah. I mean, I was in my mom's womb, probably. But as far as the inspiration, so when I was 11, my dad was diagnosed with ALS, which is a terminal illness, and he was sick through my growing up, and that I'm very grateful actually that I was able to have these tough conversations at a much earlier age about death and emotions and about how our lives were changing, and I was grateful to have parents that were, especially my mom, that were talking about that with us, and she did such a beautiful job, just kind of weaning that reality into our minds. And as I got older, I got really, my mom sent me to therapy against my will when I was like 13. Ended up liking it. Who knew? And I had pretty bad undiagnosed anxiety for my whole life. And so between all these things, I started getting really into personal development type stuff. And I started listening to podcasts on a regular basis when I was 15, just about inspiring people. And it made me really excited. And I've always been a big dreamer. I've always had so many ideas and goals. And I've always been a bit of an entrepreneur since I was a child. I looked, eventually, after a few years of consuming all this content, I looked at the space of specifically self-help. And I noticed that a lot of it was, one, targeted to middle-aged women, and two, it was, I would hear a lot of things on these podcasts of people saying, if I was the way I was in college, like I would be miserable and I was just the worst and I was an idiot. And I was like, well, what if you weren't, and what if people want to feel fulfilled and enjoy who they are as soon as they're teens? Maybe they can do that. And maybe they don't need to be super miserable and confused in their 20s. And maybe they don't need to just like figure it out as they go. Maybe there's skills that they can have. Maybe they can be better equipped. And so I didn't really see very much advocacy for emotional intelligence and of a young person to young people. And that's why I got in the space. And yes, I'm a coach and an author and all this, but I see myself as an advocate first and foremost of learning these things as soon as possible.
Wow. That's a pretty lofty goal, but also an astute observation of the space being geared to humans when they're already developed. Why not get to them when they're younger? This is definitely a question I've had. So how do you go about it, Libby? How do you take this goal and turn it into something actionable? What are you doing in the world with 20-somethings and teens?
Yeah. So, there's a quote that I love, and it says, if you feel like you can achieve your goal or your mission in your lifetime, you're shooting too small. So this is kind of my life passion. And, we've had a big, mental health movement. We had quite, when I was in elementary school, there was a big fitness nutrition movement. And I'm hoping that in my lifetime I can see an emotional intelligence or social emotional learning movement, in where we finally really value on a core level emotional learning as a society. And as far as the work that I do, so I've been running my podcast called Today's the Future for about 3 years. And starting out, it was just me creating a platform to essentially talk about these things specifically with other young people. And I call it Today's the Future because, another thing I would hear in this content was that young people are the future and they're the up and coming. And I didn't like that, because I saw all these young people that were the head of these movements. And I'm like, well, they're not the future. They're today, and they're already extremely powerful, and the world needs young minds to change it. And so I've created a platform for some really incredible humans on there. And
so younger people, you help younger people create their own platform to share their voices.
Yeah. And that was the idea behind the podcast. And now I've also included, now I do a little bit of where I, not just young people, but I want to, and this has been changed because of audience feedback and whatnot, but just supplying lessons in life skills that people specifically have an expertise in, that young people can learn from, that they're not getting elsewhere, whether that be from their parents, the education system.
I'm curious to hear what those are. I'm curious what the top topics or what people ask you for the most. Being a parent of tweens and teens.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah. So that was the cool thing, that I was able to do my podcast for so long as I was writing my book. So I published my book this year, February 2022. I had the idea when I was 18, and started writing amidst the start of the pandemic, and spent about 2 years on it. The main topics that I see, obviously, one is financial literacy. A lot of kids want to be more financially literate. Two, there's just this overall feeling of unfulfillment that I see a lot of kids message me about, and feeling the main thing that I talk about is living in alignment, which is essentially aligning your core values, and who you are with your actions, and how that can create an underlying tone of peace in your life. And a lot of young people have never been taught that although there is anxiety and there is stress, that it is possible to have underlying peace through the alignment of who you are and what you do. And so I talk a lot about that in my book, because, and to go deeper on the living in alignment, it all really comes down to mindfulness, because in order to figure out those things about yourself, what are your core values? Am I aligning my actions? It comes down to tuning into being more mindful, and learning to be harmonious with your thoughts, and not labeling certain emotions as bad. And
can I ask a clarifying question on that?
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about this, actually, as somebody who's in midlife, but interacting with a lot of young people and my own kids. And there feels like, when you talk about alignment, there feels to be even more pressure from parents and our education systems and our systems to impose what the values are, to impose the direction that our kids need to take, or even what they need to believe about their future and their lives and who they are. So if we keep imposing, there's never a chance for young people to listen to their gut. You talk about mindfulness, like, right. What does my voice say? Like, they don't even know.
The intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why that's one of the main things I focus on, is because for so many years, especially the self-help space, and it's great, there's really awesome things, there's also not as awesome things, but, has focused on, and personal development has focused on tactics and things you can do and ways you can build out habits differently, or you can, the ways that you can think differently. But I think if at the core of all of it is, I don't need to tell you what to do. If you like, it's all in here. If I can teach you how to fish, you'll always have fish. And so I don't need to tell you the answers. If I can teach a young person how to listen to their intuition and get rid of all the crap that isn't them.
And permission. I bet you are giving a whole lot of space for permission, right?
Yes. Permission and getting and clearing out the crap that isn't them, to strip them down to who they actually are before they were this and that and traumatized and reprogrammed. It'll be pretty amazing for the rest of their lives and for generations after them. So
but you've got a lot of young people in touch with you all the time.
I do. It's very fun.
Yeah, I bet. And I would love for you to share some words for parents who are listening. That is primarily who my audience is. And I would really appreciate you sharing some words of parents who have 20-somethings or teens. What is something that you'd like to just drop into their space and re-remind them?
I love this question, and thank you for asking it. And I haven't had the opportunity in quite this way to touch on this. It actually makes me feel a little bit emotional because I just have so many young people that reach out to me that would love to feel heard by their parents, and that's all they seek. And I think the number one thing I would ask of parents is to just love them and ask them if they're okay, because it means more to them than you know. And instead of and trying, when you're having these difficult conversations with your young adult or your child, to not try and take a route of who's right and who's wrong, but maybe both sides are right, and maybe both sides, depending on the information that they have and where they're coming from, have something that rings true. And just because it's not you two against each other, it's you two against the problem or the conflict.
Oh, I love that.
And I think the more that we can talk to our children in that way and text them and say, "Are you okay?" If their grades are struggling, or if they're coming home late, instead of anger, maybe, "Are you okay? What's happening?" Or why is there something? Create an open space of, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Even there doesn't need to be this smoke and mirrors of I am the Omega, I know all, because at the end of the day, it's not going to turn out well. And I think if you can show love, your children will also, listen to you out of respect instead of out of fear or out of just obedience.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Libby. That is a beautiful share. And I hope parents all over heed those words and see and hear and listen and love their kids. How do people find you? How can I direct them? I'm going to put your links below. What's the easiest way to catch you?
Yeah, so LivyRedden.com, that has all my stuff. I do a lot of stuff, especially on TikTok, which is also just at Livi Redden, but you can really just find me on any platform.
You're all over.
I'm all over.
You're all over. Well, I can't wait to keep following you. This is first of many, I hope. Thank you so much, Libby.
Yeah, thank you. And also the book, if anyone's interested for themselves or for their young adult, that's available on my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. The sooner you know, the better. I've already had some pretty cool feedback on how it's been able to change people's lives. So excited about that.
I'm excited for you. Thanks, Libby.